That's really easy. So I'll see if I can do a bit of a speedy Gonzalez pass.
Yeah, that's half throttle for sure.
So I'll line it up here, going full throttle now.
Alright, nice.
Going up. It's got good climb. I'm on idle. Here we go, here we go, here we go. Hey! Got it! Hey, it's Vas here from Aussie RC Airspace, and welcome to my review of the XFly model Eagle Twin 40mm EDF wing. Now this is a 4S wing, and as you can see, it's got two 40mm EDFs at each end of the wing, which gives it a really unique look. It is available in the green and the red, and there's quite a lot that we need to talk about in this wing, just so that you have a good flying experience with it. So let's get into this review. Starting off with the specs, as always, we have a wingspan of 1019 millimeters. Overall length is 383 millimeters. The flying weight in the book claims to be 650 grams, but my wing is pushing closer to about 790 grams. This will vary, of course, depending on the type of battery that you use, but 650 just seems a little bit light. I think the manual is a little bit wrong there. Now, the EDFs, as I said, are a 40mm. They are a 12 blade fan, and they sound really, really good for their size. The motor is a 1413 5000 kV, now that's times 2, and of course you also have two 20 amp ESCs powering those motors. Servos are a 9-gram digital servo. The wing does come with a built-in gyro, but you can turn that off. It is an option that we'll talk about a bit later on. You are going to need a minimum of 5 channels to operate this and get it all connected up. And the recommended battery in the manual, it says that it's a 1800 to 2200 4S, but I would recommend you lean towards the 2200 or bigger, because this wing does require a little bit of nose weight to make sure you get the CG right, which we'll talk about next. Well, assembly is pretty easy because there is no assembly with this wing. It comes out of the box in one piece, and all you got to do is install your receiver and set it all up. Moving on to center of gravity, and this is something that's actually very important on this wing. I know that with some aircraft you can move center of gravity back and forth a little bit depending on how you want the aircraft to fly, and in most cases you can even improve the way that it flies by moving the center of gravity depending on your style of flying and all that sort of thing. I myself have moved center of gravity back as much as 10 to 15 millimeters on some of my Delta wings, just so that I can hang out for a little bit to take off from the ground a little better, and they just fly a bit more neutral rather than being a bit nose heavy. But in something like this, you don't want to mess around with CG too much. You want to be pretty much by the book, because that's given me the best flying experience with this wing. Now, the book itself says that it should be about 162 millimeters from the tip of the nose to the center of gravity line there. And they actually give you a little bit of a helping hand here on how you can get that by measuring 128 millimeters from the edge of the pod there on both sides, and that should give you the center of gravity line just there. Now, I'll give you another cheat as well on how you can get that center of gravity line. As you'll see here with mine, I've got a couple of silver dots that I've put down that I measured out. But if you notice, it's actually on the edge, or rather that front edge of these finger grips, right? Because these are the finger grips to help you launch it. If you mark your center of gravity line right there, you should actually be pretty right. So if I put my fingers right on the edge of those finger grips, you'll see that the wing actually does balance quite well. It's a little tricky to balance on the edge, but if I put it on the dots where I get a little bit more real estate, it's obviously flatter, the wing balances perfectly right there. Now, there are a couple of things that you need to do in order to achieve this, because that's where your line should be, but how do you get it with the batteries that they recommend? Like, as I said at the start, 1800 I feel is too light. I'm actually using one of my heavier batteries, which is these 2200 graphene, but I would probably recommend you maybe try like a high 2000s, maybe up to a 3000, to avoid putting nose weight, because even though I'm using one of my heaviest batteries, I still need to add a little bit of nose weight to get that center of gravity. Now, I do also use these Turnigy HD packs. Now, I've had these for years, right? This is not sponsored by Hobby King or anything like that, but I'm just mentioning that these are the heaviest packs. If you've got small, more compact batteries that are a little bit lighter, you're gonna end up having to add more nose weight. So I would probably see, if you don't have any 4Ss, or if you want to avoid adding nose weight, maybe invest in some larger batteries that are not going to give you, so that you have a better chance of hitting CG without adding additional nose weight there, which is essentially just dead weight in the wing. Now, regarding the setup on the XFly Eagle, there is quite a bit that I want to go into here and explain. So I'm going to be splitting this up into two parts. Part number one is going to be just a quick one showing you how to plug everything into your receiver, just so that you get that right. And then we'll move on to the radio and how to create the model, how to set it all up and make sure everything's working correctly so you have a good flying experience with this wing. All right, so moving on to the receiver. I'll try and make this as nice and quick as possible. This is how it all comes out of the box, minus the receiver, okay? So the gyro is already stuck down. All of these cables should already be plugged into the gyro, and then there's some more cables that run underneath the battery tray and come out of the other side. They also supply some double-sided tape on this side for you to stick down your receiver. And that's it, right? You've got your setup. Now, the way that you connect this up, and this is why you need more than 4 channels on this wing, is that you've got 5 cables that are plugged into the receiver. One of them labeled gear, which is really just to control the flight modes on the gyro. So the first one here is going to be my throttle, so that's on channel number 1, and this is a 3-wire plug. The second one is the aileron, and this is a single wire plug that goes into the second channel. The third channel is my elevators, and that is again another 3-channel connection. And then the fourth one is my rudder, which is just a single wire connection. And then of course we've got the gear in channel 5, which is again another single wire connection. That's the brown one right there. So once you've got all of that set up, then you can start creating a model and start setting all of this thing up. So let's move on to that. So once you've got everything plugged into your receiver, it's time to set up a model on your radio. Now, setting up a model on the radio, all you need to do is set it up like a standard model. You don't need to set it up as a Delta or anything like that. So just a standard 4-channel aeroplane with the throttle, aileron, elevator, and rudder. That's all you got to do, and then bind it to your receiver. Once you've got that bound, make sure you calibrate your ESCs, set up your throttle cut switch, and make sure all your control surfaces and everything is going in the right direction, everything's working correctly. And also check the rudder. Now, the rudder is an interesting one because obviously this doesn't have a rudder. It does have, however, differential thrust, and that is what's going to give you your rudder turns. Now, what you want to do when you're setting up your rudder is, if you want to go to the right, so if you push the rudder to the right, this pod should come on and push the wing to the right. And then obviously if you want to push to the left, that pod should come on and push the wing to the left. And essentially, that's how you know the rudder is working in the right direction, okay? Once you've got that all going correctly, then it's time to set up the rest of the wing. Now, the first thing you want to set up is, of course, your gyro. So the gyro or gear switch rather, on the Spectrum radios will default to channel A, which is a 2-position switch. Now, traditionally for a gear, that would be fine, but we have 3 flight modes with this gyro, so we want to set it up on a 3-position switch. Now, you can probably get away with a 2-position switch if you really want to, if you want to put it here or something like that. But I've got mine set up on a 3-position switch just so that I can toggle between all 3 and it all works perfectly fine. And I've got it on this switch right here. So just go into your menus, allocate the switch that you want, and away you go. So once you've got that done, it should default to the lock mode. So the gyro instructions actually come on a separate A4 paper that's in the actual manual of the wing. It's got some diagrams here that kind of show you how to hook everything up in case you need to rewire anything. It's also got some instructions regarding gains, which I personally haven't played around with. And then you've got the flight modes, and this is the paragraph we're really going to be focusing on here. It's this one right here. So when it defaults into lock mode, which is flight mode number 1, the LED always flashes. So if I flick that and have the LED flashing, that's our lock mode. Now, personally, I think this is the worst mode that I've ever seen on any gyro. I don't know why XFly put this mode in here, because it just makes the wing almost like not impossible to fly, it just makes it really unpleasant to fly. And the reason for that is lock mode, control surfaces will be locked on this mode, which is an additional function to the stabilize mode. When no control input is given, the gyro helps maintain the current flight attitude to the greatest extent. So essentially what that does is that it kind of keeps the plane going in the direction of your last input. So if you have the plane kind of pitching up a little bit, it'll keep the plane going in that angle as long as you have throttle. It'll just keep and maintain that attitude. And what I found, it wasn't so much of an issue on the roll for some reason, but on the pitch, it was really kind of touchy. And I think the reason for that is because it gave me a bit of a deadband on my stick. So what would happen is I would pull up and the wing would kind of be going up a little bit, and then I'd start to push down to have the wing level out, and nothing would happen, and then it'll reach a certain threshold where it would release that whatever throw I had in there, and then the wing would point down too much, and then I have to repeat the process going the other way. And I was constantly doing this with the wing. I could never really get it to fly level and like a normal plane. And it was frustrating me because I thought, well, maybe it's my rates, maybe it's my throws, maybe I don't have an expo. And then later, after a couple of flights, I figured out, well, I'm just in the wrong bloody flight mode. So what you want to do is you want to fly in stabilize mode. And stabilize mode has a solid light on the gyro. So this mode, this is the gem. Like, this mode flies so good. So stabilize mode, LED always on. It features correction function and flexible operations, especially suitable for 3D flying. I don't think they mean 3D flying as such. I think it just means that it's like fully aerobatic and you can do whatever you want whilst it's being stabilized. I think that's what they mean by that. So if you are about to maiden this wing and you've got the LED flashing, toggle your switch until that LED is solid. Because that's the mode you want to fly in. That's where this plane really shines. And I think that's why there have been some people online that have been having some trouble with this wing. They may have just been flying in the wrong flight mode, and also they may have had the CG a bit wrong as well. Now, of course, the third mode is gyro off, which is just the LED off on the gyro. And the plane does actually fly perfectly fine with the gyro off. I've flown it a few times with gyro off. There's no issues with it at all. It flies like a standard normal wing. The biggest difference is that you don't have, differential thrust, and you don't have any rudder input. So it doesn't matter what you do. There's no differential thrust anymore. So you kind of forfeit that when you turn the gyro off. And I guess that's not a bad thing when you've got gyro off. But yeah, when you've got gyro on, you've got a solid light, you've got differential thrust, you have all your stabilizers going on and everything, and it just flies so good. Now, one last thing, whilst we've got this set up here, just take note of how my elevons, my control surfaces, are set up in relative to the actual plane itself, to the fuselage. So you'll notice here that I'm probably about a 1.5 millimeters to 2 millimeters down, and same thing on this side. So when you set this up for maiden, don't bother having this flush with the fuse. Have it down at least 1 millimeter, because the plane will just want to keep climbing otherwise. Even with the extra nose weight and everything and the heavier pack, the reflex that they've got here is probably just a tad too much. Yeah, I found that this works best with about 1 millimeter, 1.5 millimeters down or so, and then you can just trim it out on your radio for that fine tuning. I've set up a couple of these. I've got the green one, a mate of mine's got a red one. I set his up the same way, and they work, they fly amazing. So I've had no problem setting this up at all. Now, the last thing on the radio here is just going to be rates and throws and everything else. So we'll try and get through this as quickly as possible here. I got 4 minutes on my timer. This is actually a very efficient wing, and a 2200 will get you 4 minutes of throttle, no problem at all. If you've got a bit of wind and you can glide around a little bit more, do some slope soaring, whatever, you'll double that time, maybe even more, quite easily with the 2200 4S. As far as throws and everything else, my travel here on both the aileron and the elevator is set to 140, but notice that my rudder is about 50. So you don't want too much rudder in this, unless you just want to do crazy flippity flips. You don't want too much rudder in this wing because the differential thrust is actually quite powerful. And I found that, the first few flights I had everything set to 100, not knowing how sensitive this was going to be. And I actually found that it was just really hard to control, stall turns and things like that, because as soon as you kick it over a little bit too much, there was just too much power and the thing would just flip and tumble and carry on, which if you're high enough can be a bit of fun and it's a cool stunt to do with the wing like this. But if you do want to do those controlled turns, especially if you want to fly level and just do some yaw turns, you don't want too much rudder. It's just a bit too much. Now, I've set mine to 50. You can play around with your settings and go from there, but I do recommend you turn that down quite a bit. Now, we'll go into dual rate and expo. So on my aileron and elevator, my settings are exactly the same. So I've got 70% throws and 25% expo on both aileron and elevator, 85 and 30, and then 135 for high rates. Now, the only one that's a little bit different is my rudder, because what I've done is I've gone 80 and 20 for low, 90 and 25 for mid, and 130 for high. Now, that is based on that 50% travel, okay? So I'm only using very little rudder input in this wing because like I said, if you put too much, it just tumbles the thing all over the place. So those are my settings. This is how you want the plane to be set up, and you should have a very good flying experience with this aircraft once you get it set up like this. And I'll show you the very first flight, not the very first flight, but the very first flight of this video, which is a nice little demo flight. It was a little bit breezy, but not too windy, but it was a really nice sunny day, and I hope you enjoyed this flight, and then we'll come back and I'll give you my overall thoughts on the wing. Alrighty, quick demo flight of the XFly Eagle. We are going to go stability mode. We're going to turn our throttle on, timer start, give it some throttle. And just a quick flick of the wrist and it's airborne. It'll climb straight up without any issues at all. We'll roll her over and we'll come down full pace at 100 and I think it was 176 or 178 kilometers an hour was the maximum, with some tailwind the other day. Nice axial rolls, beautiful, very locked in on the stability mode. Flies absolutely fantastic. Now throttle off with the wind. We're going to go up at the end and we're going to kick the rudder ever so slightly, just so it kind of like does like a rudder turn, like a hammerhead type of turn. But you got to be really gentle on that rudder, otherwise it'll flip the wing all over the place. All right, we're going to go inverted here. It's a very neutral plane inverted. It hardly needs any push on the elevator. When you have your CGE set correctly, it flies very, very neutral. Look at that. Pushing out.
Time remaining 3 minutes.
And back down. And we're going to throttle off down the runway here against the wind. Swing it back around. We'll do another fast pass. All right, pouring on the coals, full speed, super quiet, very, very stable wing. Nice big barrel roll right in front there. Swing it back around, downwind, throttle off. Super stable, very, very nice. Going up again, we'll try and do the hammerhead turn again. So we'll kick the rudder over just a bit. There it is. And now what we'll do is we'll go straight up at the end here, but we'll go up really, really high And now we'll kick the rudder hard and you'll see it flip all over the place. There we go. And then once that does its flip, just relax the controls, let the nose fall, because the nose will naturally come down, and then just regain control that way. If you try to fight it, you're just going to smash it. You don't want to be doing that. Now the same thing can be done when you are flat, so when you are level, but you need to be, again, you need to be fairly high up for that recovery. All right, so going up again. Let's see if we can do another hammerhead turn here. So kick the rudder over slightly. There it is. Beautiful. Look at that. Such a nice wing to fly. Pulling up, rolling over, back down again, throttle off. We're going to do some nice slow turns out in front here. So you just really test out its stability and how well locked in it is. You can see there, it's even with a bit of a breeze. I mean, I've got wind coming from my left, straight down the runway, and this thing doesn't really care. I flew it the other day on much higher winds, and it's rock solid.
Time remaining 1 minute.
Really nice wing to fly. My rates aren't super high. I think I'm down to about 80% or something like that on my aileron. Going up, rolling over, full throttle pass, and let's ease off, set up for a landing here. Now this floats for absolute forever. Oh, flies in my face. Going up quite a bit wide there, so I'm throttle off. Trying to stay above the tree line there and bushes. There we go, letting it sink here. Come on. So it just glides forever. All the way down the runway. I was throttle off before I made the turn on the tree, and it just goes forever. It's over 5.5 minutes, or just under 5.5 minutes flight time. So we got 5 minutes 26 with about 30 seconds left on the timer. So I probably could have gone around and tried to slow it down even a little bit more, but it's all right. I don't mind the walk, need the exercise anyway. Now, before we get onto the pilot feedback, I do want to disclose that I did pay for this wing myself. Nobody reached out and offered it to me for review. I'm doing this review purely because I want to, and because I wanted to clear up any kind of confusion about whether or not this is actually a good wing to fly, because I have seen videos online of this thing having a little bit of trouble, or with some pilots having some trouble with it. And I think it really just comes down to a couple of things. One is center of gravity, and the other one is the overall setup and the flight mode that you are flying in. I think that hold mode is really very detrimental to this wing. It shouldn't be on that gyro. And if you get the CG wrong, well, then that's going to be just a bad day at the field. So I wanted to do this review just to clear up all of this. Hopefully you've got all the information that you need, and now we can move on to my overall thoughts on this wing. All right, first of all, aesthetically, I love the way this looks. I think it looks a little bit like that Houghton 229 design, except that had the jets kind of closer to the center of the fuselage, while this has the pods on the end. And this pods on the end is actually not a bad idea, because as you saw, you have differential thrust, you can do all sorts of crazy stunts with it. You can yaw this wing without having a physical rudder. And of course the gyro definitely helps with that as well. So aesthetically, for me personally, I love the way this looks. I think XFly did a fantastic job. It's also available in the red, which does look very good as well. It does have some nice protection underneath, as you would have seen before. You've got a bit of a plastic skid here. You've got some more little feet over here to keep the pods off the grass and some hard surfaces. Now, I will say, I would have liked to have seen this extend out a little bit further to protect the rest of the foam. I think that is definitely warranted in this scenario, just to have that come out a little bit. I've also would have liked to have seen a couple of covers on the servos here, on the servo arms. I can get them 3D printed from a couple other 3D printed planes that I have, so I may actually put them on here. I haven't decided what I'm going to do yet, but I may do that in the future. And these little feet I think are fine. I don't have so much of an issue with those. But yeah, just some covers on the servo horns I think would be good. Aside from that, there's really not a lot that I can complain about. It does have a bit of a plastic cover on the nose here, which is kind of cool. And then, you know, this is just magnetized in. There's ample room here to put your 2200s, your receiver, and you can even go a little bit bigger as well. If you run out of space to put nose weight here, you can also put a little bit of nose weight on the canopy. The canopy is actually quite deep, provided it doesn't interfere with your battery. I don't see why you wouldn't be able to put some extra nose weight there if you need to, right? If you're running some smaller batteries. Yeah, overall aesthetically, I have no issues. The design of it, I think, is fantastic. Now, of course, flying the wing, when I flew it in that lock mode, it was terrible. I didn't really enjoy it. But once I figured out that it needed to be in that stabilized mode, this wing flies absolutely fantastic. It always turns heads when I take it to the field, especially for those that haven't seen it before. They always come up and ask about it, and you know, with the two pods, the two EDFs at either end, it's a very unique look, and it's always a bit of a point of conversation. And it flies incredibly stable. It's very fast. It can also fly quite slow. It's very efficient, so you can slope saw it if you want to. Fly it, you know, for much longer than 4 minutes on some windy days. Just cut the throttle and let this thing glide. And you'll see that in the next flight video at the end of this review. So yeah, I personally really like it. I don't have a lot of negatives. You know, there's a couple of little critiques that I talked about just before, but there's really nothing here that's a deal breaker for me. It's well priced. It comes with the gyro, couple of colors. I mean, what more do you want? I think this is a fantastic wing. And you know, I'm sorry that some of you may have seen some rather negative videos out there on YouTube, but I honestly feel that those people may have had it set up wrong, or they had the CG wrong or something like that, because you know, you don't need to be a super skilled pilot to fly this. When you have it in the right gyro mode and you've got everything set up correctly, this thing flies like an absolute dream. And yeah, I really don't have a lot of negatives here. I personally really like it, and I recommend it. So now I'm going to leave you here with the final flight video of this review. I'm actually going to be flying this in the very windy conditions, and you'll see it and hear it. So for those of you who may be wearing headphones, watch out, because it's going to be quite windy. But it's a lot of fun to fly this on the windy day, because the gyro helps a lot. And it just increases the speed when you throttle it downwind. This thing just absolutely hammers. It can disappear on you quite quickly, so be mindful of that, because it does cover a lot of ground. Yeah, it's a lot of fun to fly this in high winds. I personally really enjoy it. So I'll leave you with the final flight of this review, and I will end the video here. Thank you all very much for watching. If you enjoyed it and got something out of it, be sure to hit that thumbs up button before you go. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're new. I've got a lot more content coming up on this channel, and I'll be speaking to you all next time. Alrighty, windy flight with the XFly Eagle. Let's go. It wanted to leave my hand so bad. Throttle off pass. Let's see if it'll hover a little bit. Oh, look at that, no problem. It's just sitting there now. I know you can't tell probably because it's a clear blue sky, but it is hardly moving forward. I'm on idle, and it is just sitting there. bit of input now. See if I can get a little bit of height here. There we go. Beautiful. All right. Let's go straight up here. We're going to do a full throttle pass with the wind. It's going to be really, really fast. In cooks. If I throttle off to try and come past, it basically comes to a stop almost. And it's very gusty. Alright, let's see if we can kick the rudder. Here we go. I can't even do it properly because there's not enough. There's not enough. The wind's just hampering all of those maneuvers. I might go to medium rates and see if I can kick the rudder over. So we'll go up in the middle here, going up. And now we should kick, yes, now we got it, there we go. Yeah, on medium rates it does it a lot better now. Let's see, what's our roll rate like? Oh yeah, medium rate's really nice. Jeez, with the wind this thing just goes. Going back to low rates, keeping it nice and smooth here. Landing this is going to be an interesting scenario. This thing, when it gets a couple of meters above the deck, it's just all over the place. See if we can get down a bit low here. We're going to getting buffeted around.
Time remaining 2 minutes.
Yeah, I reckon I could land this. Let's see if we can try and land it on the next pass. So full throttle here as we're going with the wind. I'm easing off. And idle power there. And let's see, it should stop. I'm going to have to input power now just to get it to come to me. Here we go, here we go. Easy, no worries. That was perfect.